The Declaration is a reminder, first of all, of what our fundamental principles about government are. Your rights don't come from the government. They precede the government. It's a reminder of the struggle that people went through here and are still going through around the world for the same unalienable rights.
So the Congress had started meeting in the spring of 1775, but by the time they started, this was the Second Continental Congress. Lexington and Concord had already happened. So immediately they become a war Congress. And suddenly their job was to try to figure out how do you win a war, as opposed to, can we negotiate with Britain? Can we reconcile with Britain? So by the late spring of 1776, it's clear that, number one, Britain is not interested in any type of reconciliation. And then secondly, that in order to win this war, which they were losing at the time, they were going to need foreign support. So that pushed the question of independence. The Congress eventually moves to this position of deciding that it's going to vote for independence. They had formed a committee of 5 members with Ben Franklin and John Adams and Thomas Jefferson on it to write a declaration, an announcement, assuming that they were going to vote for independence. So this is what they start debating on July 2nd. They debate through the 3rd, and then on the 4th, they adopt this statement, what later became known as the Declaration of Independence.
Fundamentally, it's a declaration of independence, meaning the message to the world is, pay attention, we are not a British colony anymore. A new country has been created, and you need to think about what that means for you. You're going to have a new and different relationship with these 13 states than you had with us when we were British colonies.
That was one of the lines near the end of the Declaration that said, being free and independent states, they may now conduct foreign relations as all other states can do, and do all these things that states can do. What that really meant was make a treaty, have an alliance, which eventually we did sign with France 2 years later, and then with Spain, and then we got aid from the Netherlands and other places. At home, it was an announcement of sovereignty in the midst of a war. Abroad, it was an announcement of sovereignty that, yes, it's in the middle of a war, but this is a new nation. It is seeking its seat at the table of all other nations, and no one had ever done that.
I think a lot of students, when they look at the Declaration, are surprised at how much of it is actually a list of complaints, which is really what it is. All the things that the King of England did to the American colonists. And you can sum them up in saying he took away, or tried, their unalienable rights to life, to liberty, to property. Unalienable rights means no government has the right to take them away. Not the kings and not the new American government. They're God-given, or they're natural rights.
So the claims are both universal and particularistic. They're universal in that they believed what they meant, that all people had a right to life, to liberty, to happiness. But in terms of Britain, the claim was that Americans, as political actors in this imperial community, could not be denied their rights, and they were, and therefore they were justified in revolution. But inalienable to them literally meant things you couldn't trade away, like property you can trade away. But one's liberty, or even more basic, one's life, could not be sold. They could not be traded. And everyone onward from 1776 who is aiming at abolition and ending slavery ultimately appeals back to the Declaration.
The question of how our concept of unalienable rights feeds into our foreign policy is found at the very beginning. I think the critical thing here is power. What we were most concerned about before the Civil War, putting aside the slavery question, was our own borders. But we get past that, we start becoming a powerful country. And then we really do face the question, do we care about despotism? And what feeds it, again, is this concept of unalienable rights. If you believe that these are the rights of man, that these are God-given rights, that they belong to, quote, all men who are, quote, created equal, then if you have the power, it's natural to begin to take an interest in what is happening to other people around the world and the nature of those governments.
No, it's one thing for a very small new country of 13 states just perched on the Atlantic seaboard to sort of declare its innocence and declare its virtue that it will not get involved in old world types of colonization or squabbles, and very different for the most powerful nation in the world by any standard you measure to also say we're not going to engage with the world. After World War II, the lesson is you can't do that what happens abroad does affect us at home. We like to think that ultimately what we do in the world strengthens freedom, expands freedom, redounds to freedom. But certainly in the short run, maybe in the medium runs, if you're concerned above all with your sovereignty, then it's order that you need to have globally, because that will help protect sovereignty is global order. And it's something I think that we're always going to struggle with.
The Declaration is a reminder, first of all, of what our fundamental principles about government are. Your rights don't come from the government. They precede the government. It's a reminder of this struggle that people went through here and are still going through around the world for the same unalienable rights. During the Cold War, we pushed in the direction of democratization because we wanted our side to really comport with the idea that we have a view of how people should govern themselves, not be governed by tyrants. So this division became, I would argue, one of the critical assets of the United States. There is a reason that when the Chinese rose up in Tiananmen Square to demand self-government, they created a Statue of Liberty because they understood what I think too many Americans fail to understand to this day, that the ideals of the Declaration are not just American. They appeal to men and women around the globe, and that appeal and that association of the United States with the cause of liberty is a tremendous asset to the United States.
These are the most powerful, universal, eternal, unrealizable in some ways, ideas ever expressed by man. All men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. For a quarter of a millennium already, these have stood the test of time, and that's a pretty good measure that they're real, that they appeal far beyond our shores. People want freedom, they want liberty, they want better lives for themselves and their children. And the best way, not always the perfect way, and often a very messy way, but the best way that we know to ensure that overall is by giving people liberty and self-determination, that they can determine their future. So I think these lines, which are beautiful in themselves, this musical, lyrical way of expressing it has been in the hearts and minds and on the lips of Americans for 250 years, fully expresses the greatness of the ideas.